Tim, I was a little shocked upon reading up on this film to see that you are in fact not Irish. You're Belgian. Um, that Tell me a little bit about how you ended up on this very, very Irish project.
Um, how it all came about, of course, it's all about Cillian, knowing Cillian from Peaky Blinders. And then Cillian saw my first feature, Patrick, which I considered as maybe the end of my career, but he loved it because it's about a man looking for his hammer in a nudist camp. And then, but always,
Sold. I'm gonna watch that.
yeah. So, but it's always, well, the team now always comes back is grief. And Killian's and we were looking for material, and it's like Cillian said, like, I want to work with you again. And it was Cillian's wife who also knows me very well, who was kind of waving with the book in front of us. And then I recognized the grief story, but I believe grief is universal, and grief is kind of the engine of the story. And I also, Belgium, where I come from, is Roman Catholic Church is like in every layer of society. Um, it felt I was not too alienated to the subject matter. And of course, I felt I was very honest to everyone. And Irish people are very nice people. And I said, like, I'm sorry, I'm not carrying the heavy load of Irish history on my shoulders, but teach me, please.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that process, I guess, of being taught about the world of Ireland when you're working with the various members of your production team and the creative team on this.
Um, I think also I didn't want to be a slave of that Irish culture. Foremost, I want to say like the engine again and the structure of it and the reason why the character does it is grief, and it was more like getting that front and center and right. That was like the toughest thing, and then was just like every aspect like. Okay, what's universal about this is like when you're silent, you're complicit, and that's something I understand as well, which is everywhere. And then it was just like in clothing, or sometimes in there was sometimes in like the Catholic statues were a little bit different than where I come from.
Hmm.
Also, but there were first a lot of similarities. What's different really was like the period where it takes place. I think this story happened in 85. That wouldn't be the case somewhere else in Europe. This is a story we're digging up our own dirt in many ways in Belgium, but that story would have taken place somewhere in the 30s, 40s.
Yeah, it's very shocking and it's very sad, obviously, that this atrocity kind of was continuing on into the 80s. Um, it's there's a lot of things obviously that don't necessarily seem like they would be as recent as you'd think they were in this film. Another one is that, obviously Cillian is very, he's working transporting coal, which is something that I don't necessarily associate with the 1980s. Tell me a little bit about how you put together the introductory sequence for Cillian. It's all silent, we go from him he's shoveling coal, and then you have these great tracking shots mounted on the back of the car following him, and he stops in a bar, then he's driving again, his hands are covered in coal dust. It's a very evocative way to introduce that character. So tell me a little bit about how you develop this intro to him and his world.
When you read the book, I felt like I should be a silent observer. I think like camera in one place. And so also the camera position is very neutral. So kind of like the symmetry is right. Like it's the same hallway, same living room, comes back in the same shots, same as you said on the back of the car, the top shot on the hands. So it was a kind of God's eye, if you will. Like that comes back repetition. And then the camera does something else, like being very starts to move from a POV and then becomes kind of transcendental. And I kind of, by having that approach, I felt like I feel like I'm having like an almost religious approach
Hmm.
to look at the movie and observe the movie. And that was the starting idea. And yeah, that's where it came from. And finding the right references, we get like a Van Gogh Dutch period. That's something I brought from where I come from.
Well, yeah, I do love the visuals. It's this very gloomy, sad-looking Ireland. So tell me a little bit about working with your, I believe, also Belgian DP on capturing Ireland in its grayest, saddest form, because there's really beautiful lighting and framing choices here.
Yeah, I think we get the similar weather as Ireland. And what I always experience is like having wet Christmases. Sometimes it like it snows, but you got to get lucky. And it was like wet and the condensation against the windows, and looking through these windows and this condensation, and so we played with condensation, did tried to get that right all the time. And then going back to the right paintings in the kind of approach of the color. And then what I always do in period is using like 80s lenses. So we
Hmm.
were using the lenses from the 80s, and having the kind of framing that we got in the 80s. So I always tend to go back to, if we go period, to what was around in that time, what kind of techniques were there, and can we use them?
You know, the other thing, shifting away from the technical craftsmanship, is I see you praised by the actors who've worked with you as being an excellent director of actors. And so I was curious, you know, Cillian in this film, he's playing very silent and restrained. And then you have Emily Watson, who's doing much more of kind of a big performance, and they're kind of opposite ends of the coin. And I was curious a little bit about your process for working with both of these very acclaimed, very distinguished actors and helping them reach these kind of very opposite ends of the coin performances.
Yeah, it's all actually what I wanted to do in the story. I think for Killian, it was quite obvious. It's like structuring a pain that I experienced, and going through that kind of thought process at every stage in the grief process, and communicating that with him and mapping that out with him. So that was kind of Killian's world. And that was, of course, we have to know each other very well, and we trust each other very well, so we can be very open about that. And I think that's why the silences are so layered, because we really mapped it out, what he was really thinking about in that kind of delayed grief process. And then as far as Emily is concerned, I always pictured the convent as a place that he never wanted to enter, and is kind of a metaphor of his not coping with his own grief, because that's a place, something happened there with his mother, and he didn't want to face it. He never dealt with it. So entering the convent is actually allowing yourself to go to a place mentally where he has never been. So that gave me a kind of creative license to go slightly bigger than life, and he let Emily, someone playing who's inside of him instead of external. And so, like but the sound is the same, how the convent sounds, and so that was a kind of idea and interpretation. So you need an actress as Emily. Then you say, like, I want you to go slightly bigger than life, like hyper realistic, just a little bit, like you're inside of him, but at the same time, it still has to suit the movie and be part of the movie. So I still want you to be grounded at the same time. So kind of mixing these two worlds together. You need a talent like Emily to pull that off, and it's a lot of time. It's trial and error, and it's like one of the most challenging sequences in the movie, as for me as a director.
Oh, I'm sure. Now, you mentioned the sound in this film, and I did want to unpack that a little bit more. Tell me a little bit about um, working with music, silence, underlying drones to kind of create this very quiet but unsettling world that we live in for a lot of this film.
Yeah, I always picture Gillian's character is I think why you have to know. I'm gonna come to sound, but to understand where I'm after, what the process was like. He was a man in being 45 in 85 Ireland, what everybody explained to me, and what was the case in Belgium as well. It's like these men were not allowed to talk about their emotions. You're not allowed to do it. You have to be silent. And he lost his mother. And then I think his stepmother says to him, like, okay, it's been a week now. Now you go back to school, and this, like, never talk about it. So it's kind of, and also someone who can cope with his emotion personally. So he built like a concrete wall, and you get like this bursting volcano all the time. People talk about the silent movie, but actually internally it's very loud. And after a while, I think that kind of metaphor of bursting volcano with the fire and then going to the snowstorm, it's like it's starting to erupt. And when it erupts, so that was the kind of structure that it needed to be. That was something we played with. And then I felt like it can be acoustic in terms of sounds, because the film feels so acoustic. And it was like one of the same. So one moment we get like piano and strings on top of it, it will not work. But I think me and Cillian get the idea not to use music at all, but we didn't succeed in that. We felt we needed something. And then we had like electronic approaches. And I think this is a mixer of the movie, Jan Jansen, who said like, okay, but I get the sound of a fire. I get a sound of clocks. Let me try to do something and have kind of drones. And that was more to supply his own consciousness.
And then I have to ask this, obviously, you shot this before Oppenheimer, correct? Or before it came out, at least?
I think before it came out, but post Oppenheimer shooting. But yeah, the last director who directed Cillian was Christopher Nolan.
Yeah. So how did it feel? I guess you didn't know at the time you were making this that Cillian would be an Oscar winner this time, the following year. But how did it feel when you were premiering this movie at Berlin, and kind of now that you've gotten to show this to the world, to be the first film that had Cillian post Oscar world and post reaching new levels of fame? I've loved him for 20 years at this point, but it's, he's really reached a whole new level, and you are the first film that really gets to take advantage of more people appreciating him.
Yeah, the thing is, it's hard to say, because I know him as a friend, and I always thought, I always considered him as the best actor on the planet. So it didn't change for me very much of him winning an Oscar. I think when he said like, I get a phone call from Christopher Nolan during that movie, I thought like, okay, you are so good. If you have a commercial director as him and the talent of Christopher Nolan, that's going to be something really special. I remember even saying that's Oscar material before we start shooting it. So I kind of, so I predicted it. I think I said it to him. But then I didn't. After Small Things Like This, I made another film with him, a post-Oscar, and then of course you feel it more with the people surrounding him, or like people who wanted to visit the sets and everything else. So it's a difference. It's a difference in life for sure. Yeah.
You're saying that you have already shot another film with Cillian that's going to be coming out?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Steve.
Are you able to tell me anything about that?
It's about a caretaker looking after young criminals in England in the 90s. It's a kind of free adaptation of the Max Porter novel, Shy. We changed the name.
Oh, that's well, I can't wait to see that. I mean, he's a fantastic actor, and obviously you between this and Peaky Blinders, you draw really amazing work out of him. Well, I think we're about out of time, but I'm glad. I was gonna ask you what you had next, and you answered that question for me. So thank you so much, and thank you for creating this very emotional and just moving story. I think it's a very important piece of history that I'm glad is getting more attention. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for the interest. Thanks for the nice words. Nice talking to you.
Absolutely. Thanks.